I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to chat with you. I mean, there's a lot to chat about, and maybe at some point we'll go back into past stuff, with your amazing career. But we'll obviously start with what you have going on now, and in 2024 that maybe should have happened in 2020, which
Yeah.
is this King Dunn tour. So tell
Yep.
me all about this project.
Well, I did a record called "Gift of Sacrifice." That was my second acoustic album. I had most of it recorded, and I got the idea. Trevor was going to be in town. I got the idea. Why don't you come out and play some bass, some of your stand-up bass, which he'd done that with us in the past. We did the Freak Puke record with stand-up bass and, or as he likes to call it, concert bass. Okay, concert bass. And then uh, we did a big tour with him where we played every state plus DC in 51 days.
Oh
And
wow.
he was part of that, which was the funniest question I got asked on that was, how long does a tour like that take?
Well, there's some fuzzy math there.
Let's see.
Some rock.
The other one I liked was we were in Salt Lake City, and they said, "Well, if you're playing all 50 states, then why are you playing here?" Not a tour goes by that we play or that I don't ask myself that same question.
All right.
So
I don't feel.
I'd known Trevor for a long time. I played with him in Phantomos to begin
Mm-hmm.
with, and I've often said that the best thing I got out of my association with Phantomos was my relationship with Trevor.
Oh,
We're really good friends, and have done a lot of work together. And so anyway, I had this record, Gift of Sacrifice, well before the pandemic,
yeah.
and I had most of it done. And I brought him in. I go, maybe you can play bass on some of this, and it sounded so cool. He was doing such cool stuff that I had him planned pretty much most of the record, which is why it was called King Buzzo with Trevor Dunn instead of um, like so it's more like my record with Trevor Dunn as well. But we did some recording after that where we were equal as far as, like, both of us involved in the process of writing all the material. So we had a big tour planned. The record's going to come out, and then boom, the pandemic hits. And so we had US, Australia, Europe, South America, all of it gone in an instant. And so I put the record out anyway, and we delayed it a little bit, hoping that maybe that we'd be able to salvage some of it. But then, as you know, it ended up being a 2-year drought.
Yeah.
And I never got to tour that record, never got to do anything with it. So we're re-releasing that record with my first album, Gift of Sacrifice. I mean, This the Machine Kills Artists,
Mm.
as a double album. And included will be a flexi disc that is a song that isn't on either one of the records with Trevor. So,
Flexi
which,
disc. I remember Flexi disc. Are you going to put it in a magazine?
no, it's just thrown in the record.
Okay.
So if you buy the record, then you also get this flexi disc, buy the double album.
No
So,
back of a cereal box. That would be cool as well.
if a cereal company wanted me to do that, I'm sure I would do it. I
Cheerios.
remember those with. I remember having some of those as a kid. I think they were the Archies.
Mm.
You cut them out, so it was cardboard. It was actually pasted onto the cardboard. It's kind of cool, kind
Very
of a good
cool.
idea. And so then that's coming out, and then pretty quickly here, within a week or so, me and Trevor are putting out or Trevor and I are putting out a new live video that we also recorded, and that we'll put that out, and then you'll be able to buy that brand new song from our when you're on the tour. That is also on a flexi disc. So
Very cool. And then what's interesting to me is the timing of all this, because the Melvins record, Tarantula Heart, didn't come out that long ago, right? Like 3 months
April,
ago? April.
April,
So,
yeah,
there might be some people, I guess you're your own label boss, but right, because there might be some people who are like, pace yourself, stagger these things, don't do everything at once, but you're just this fount of creativity, I
well,
guess.
yeah. Well, I only seem massively creative compared to all the other lazy art musicians. you lower your standards enough, everything is okay.
Okay, fair enough. But you see my point of that, to be touring a record that, obviously you've explained why you're touring it now, but and it makes total sense. But to be touring a record that came out 4 years ago and doing a whole kind of reissue rollout with it, while at the same time having a pretty new
Brand new.
brand new 2 month old record, 3 month old record, like, that's interesting strategy. I mean,
Well,
I guess
I can explain what the whole story is if you'd like.
I would.
Okay. So obviously when you make records, you plan them ahead. So like that record came out in April, but I started recording that and working on that record probably over 2 years ago. And it was finished recording sometime almost a year ago. So for an April release. So you got to get it done. You got to have it mastered. You got to have the cover done, everything turned into the label months and months and months and months and months ahead of it ever coming out. So let's just say I had that thing turned in July of last year, so a year ago, with the idea that we're going to put this out and then do a big tour in the U.S. tour in the spring. Well, and then we're going to do a big U.S. tour in the spring, and then that would already be over. And then the Red Cross guys have a new album coming out, or it came out.
Yeah, I just interviewed them recently and saw them play with Dale opening up for them last week.
Oh, where'd you see it? Where'd you see him?
Alex's bar in Long Beach.
Oh yeah, I'm playing there as well.
Oh, cool! I will check it out.
That's on the 3rd of August. But so then I said, well, we'll put out this album. We'll do this tour. Then you guys have your album coming out. I will do my acoustic tour while you're doing your tour. Then that's how we planned it. So I started booking everything, got the acoustic tour booked and all these things done at the end of last summer. Then Dale, right before we were going to do a fall tour with this band Boris, Dale had this severe neck its situation where he had to go in and have a massive operation where they go through the front of your throat and then go in there and rip out a bunch of discs and put a big plate. And so we had to cancel. We almost canceled. We got Cody, our old guy used to play with us when we had 2 drummers. We got him to replace him for the Boris tour, but he wasn't going to be available to do anything in the fall because he also plays in High on Fire. And I was not he's literally the only guy that could have done this. So then we had to cancel the tour that we had planned for for the spring, because we weren't sure if Dale was going to be able to play or not. So we can't book a tour and then have it all fall through, Now, so we had to cancel that. And then I said to the label, well, do you still want to put this album out in April? They go, yeah, let's just do it anyway. So, okay. So that's the long version of how it all worked.
Well, nothing can stop you, I guess. Not a pandemic, not a neck injury. I'm glad Dale's obviously doing better. I saw him play opening for Red Cross, so he's obviously doing better.
Oh, he's way better, but there's no way to know that. I mean, we would have had to book that tour, by September at the latest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in order to do it in April, you can't do it a month before it or 2 months before it. Yeah, really, if you want to, you have to really be on it. So I'm working on. Oh, go ahead.
No, I want to hear what you say. You're working on.
I'm working on doing tours that I'm going to be doing over a year from now. Right now, I'm working on albums that are going to come out sometime next year. Now, that kind of thing. So that's how it's always worked. I always laugh that by the time my album comes out, I've already lived with it for so long that I'm ready to move on.
Yeah.
By the time it hits the streets, I'm done. I've listened to it and I've moved on. I can enjoy it up to about the time it comes out.
But at the same time,
But
at the same time, you must be excited that after a 4-year delay, basically, you are able to play the King Dunn stuff live for the first time. Is it for the first time
ever? Yeah.
Wow. will you be doing any other stuff? Like, will you be doing stuff from the new Melvins album? Will you be doing Phantomas stuff? Will you be doing a sort of career spanning between both of your careers is obviously a lot of material you guys could pull from.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely gonna be doing stuff we did together. Not all of it, but some of it. And we're gonna do stuff off of my first solo record, first acoustic record, This Machine Kills Artists. We'll do some Melvin songs. We'll do some songs that we had done together on other records.
Mm-hmm.
Phantomas, I don't think so. I'm sure that Dunn will have a couple of songs that he want. We're going to start rehearsing right away. We've already been talking about it, and I've already been planning how we're going to make it work, and some Melvin songs. But I mean, I wrote most of that stuff anyway, so it's not like
Uh,
it's a whole lot different.
Interesting question that I would ask from the point of view of a more, I don't know, layperson or casual fan, like maybe someone who doesn't know everything you've done, but they know the Melvins or whatever. There'd probably be some people that would be surprised that you have this acoustic side to you because they, when people think of the Melvins, they think of them as being, sludge or grunge or very heavy, very plugged in, obviously. So, there might be some people that were surprised that you have this whole softer side of buzz, a softer buzz to you.
I don't know how soft it is, but
Okay.
uh,
Well, that's an interesting point. The idea that acoustic music doesn't have to be coffee house soft music.
no, it always bugged me whenever I would see rock and rollers pick up an acoustic guitar, then they start trying to sound like either bad country or James Taylor, and it's just like, it's just not for me. Um, um, but they start wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots or something. It's like, okay, well, that seems like that's what always happens, and I had no interest in that. And also, if I had to pick somebody, it would be a heavy metal version of acoustic heavy metal version of Tom Waits and Bob Dylan mixed together.
That makes
That's what
sense.
it is. That's what it is. So I find Bob Dylan and Tom Waits' stuff fairly confrontational. I think. I don't think that there's a kumbaya element to Bob Dylan at all. His stuff is very weird and sharply pointed to me, especially if you listen to songs like "It's All Right, Ma." Those songs to me are just he had something that was it was not groovy hip folk rock type of thing. Not to me. I thought it was really confrontational and really poignant and powerful. And same with Tom Waits. And these are guys that wouldn't be considered virtuosos at anything, but they come across as having so much knowledge and they're so passionate about what they're doing and so obviously smart that it draws you in and makes you want to hear what message they have, which I think I always love entertainers that look like they know something that I don't. That's why I want to be there. That's be the best example of what I'm trying to get across. The same power and powerful message that I would put across in any musical thing I would do. Acoustically, it's not like Mark Arm from Mudhoney saw me do this 10 years ago when I did my first tour, and he was like, "It's the most punk rock thing you've ever done." I'm like, right. He goes, "You're not. It's not. It's like, I'm here to do my job, and I want you to understand that I'm going to give you something that you're not going to get in your everyday life. I want to make you realize why you are here.
Hmm.
It's for a reason. It's like I'm not a jukebox. I'm not. I want to give you something you're not getting in your normal everyday life. I mean, to me, art, music, stuff like that, movies, it's for people after they're done. They make a living all week, normal people, and they want to have something that takes them out of that. And that's what I do. That's my point. That's a point of my existence as a musician, is to give people that type of thing. And by God, I'm going to do my job as hard as I can. I feel very blessed that all my hard work has paid off in a way that has made it to where I can be a professional musician. and I don't take it for granted. I work all the time, and I want to do as many live shows and make as many records as I can. Bob Dylan also said they asked him when he was well into his 70s, why are you still doing all these tours?
Mm.
He goes, that's the deal that I made. Like,
Not
right?
everyone, in their 70s or even younger,
No.
50s, 60s wants to be touring all the time. Some people tour because they have to make money, to live, to put food on the table. But, if it was up to them, they wouldn't. And then, of course, there's some people that, like yourself, seem to still really love it.
I like it, but to me, it's like, if you want to be a professional musician, this is part of the deal.
Mm.
Like Bob said, that's the deal I made. Now you can take that a couple different ways. That's the deal he made in order to be a musician, a professional musician, or that's the deal that he made with the devil. You will continue to play live. It's like,
It's interesting because we were talking, about maybe the misconceptions about what acoustic music is,
right,
and you were talking about when rock bands go unplugged, basically the opposite of going electric. And I'm thinking, of course, about the time when the Melvins came to prominence in the 90s and MTV Unplugged was on, and obviously your peers Nirvana had a really successful turn at Unplugged, but there were,
yeah,
I mean, every band was doing Unplugged at that time, and a
right.
lot of them were iconic, and some of them I kind of forgot happened. But what did you think of that whole phenomenon? Like, everybody was putting out an acoustic record, everybody was doing an MTV Unplugged or something inspired by MTV Unplugged.
Yeah, I don't know how acoustic any of that stuff was.
Okay. There
um,
might have been a few things plugged in here and there.
I don't want to sit on a stool. I don't, I never watched MTV, so I was vaguely aware of it.
Hmm.
But when MTV was its heyday, I didn't even have. I don't think I even had. I certainly didn't have cable.
Wow.
I don't know where I would have seen it. I barely ever even seen it.
You weren't approached to do one? I feel like,
No, 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 no. We never sold millions of records, so
no, I know.
that was I would say 99.9% of the time reserved for people who'd sold gold and platinum album status. MTV could have cared less about us. I
Even
mean,
after, the grunge Seattle
no,
120 minutes explosion.
we were on 120 minutes a little bit, but they never showed any of our videos in regular rotation type of thing. I mean, if they would have, I'm sure it would have sold more. But in order to get on to that situation, it's just as dastardly as any other business along those lines. I mean, it's arbitrarily decided what their playlist is. I mean, not really. I mean, if you played our like take our most commercial song like Revolve, if you had played that, you know, 8 times a day on every major radio station in America, we'd have sold way more records.
100%.
That's just how it works. So how do you get to that point? It's not just it's you pay people off. You do there's a million things like that to happen. They buy advertising. They do all these things that make them do that. It's not because it's so good. I mean, good is arbitrary. you know
Was
what
that
is good?
But
I
was
mean,
that something that maybe at least, I mean, you just a few minutes ago were expressing how grateful you are about the career you have. So
yes,
you don't seem to be a bitter person, but
no, not at
was,
all.
yeah, I don't get that impression at all. But was there a time back in this era I'm talking about when, a lot of your peers were on 120 minutes and regular MTV rotation and the radio very heavily, many of whom would, quite openly say they owe a debt to the Melvins, or that basically the Melvins walked so they could run. You opened the door. And then you did have the major label deal, and that was a weird time also in the 90s. Major labels were signing up, scooping up bands that were so like willfully uncommercial. Like, I was like, really? You're signing Royal Trucks, you're signing Cop
Yeah,
Shoot Cop, you're signing Thomas Jefferson Slave Apartments. Like, these bands aren't going to sell. But like a lot of bands that would not have been given a chance a few years ago, like Boho Surfers, they were having success on major labels and at MTV. And like, was that something you were kind of hoping was going to happen or expecting was going to happen for you?
I never thought it would happen.
Really?
No, I just thought the major label thing, they'll do one album and then we'll go back to what we've been doing. I had been making a living playing music since 1988. And we got signed in the early 90s, like 92, maybe, you know. So I never thought that I never had the wounded junkie look that a lot of those bands did. And our music was far weirder.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at like a band like the Butthole Surfers, the song that they got famous, that was their biggest song, sounded like Beck.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, so it wasn't a big surprise. It wasn't like, um, uh, uh, their song, Cherub, that wasn't going to sell millions for them as much as I think it should. The world's not a right place. So we
Was
never made music that catered to that kind of thing. And I knew that. And I knew that I didn't look like those guys. We weren't, the we were uglier and weirder. And I just didn't think it would work. Sometimes you can take people that aren't outwardly in a traditional way beautiful, and their talent is so big that it steps aside from, like let's say someone like, I don't know, Aretha Franklin. It's not a traditional beauty, you know what I mean? She's beautiful, but not in a traditional way. But her talent is it's so undeniable that and she could be so commercial, regardless of how she looked, that you just had to, it was going to work no matter what. Or Tina Turner or whoever, they're just like, they're just like gods, and it's just, they were not going to be denied no matter what. But we weren't like that. We didn't have the wounded junkie look that was so popular. Probably still is, I guess. But
you never did drugs, right? You never were.
I don't do drugs. I've done stuff like that in the past, but I haven't done anything like that in a long time.
Mm.
30 plus years.
But you were never like an addict, or you lived
No.
a pretty like normal life in terms of the rock and roll lifestyle cliche.
I've never done the rock and roll lifestyle cliche thing, but I've not lived a normal life.
What we were talking about, like where you were, mentioning, for instance, Pepper, the Butthole Surfer song was a song that was not typical of how they sounded and was commercial sounding. When you were signed, actually for 3 albums, if I am, not one, if
We
I'm
did 3 albums.
with Atlantic, it was with Atlantic, right?
Yeah.
Were there any powers that be at Atlantic who were like, give us our Pepper, give us our Smells Like Teen Spirit, give us our, Black Hole Sun, give us our like one commercial song for radio? And what came of such conversations, if so?
I'm sure if we'd have went to them and said, what do we have to do to, do you tell us what to do to make it? What we really want to make it, which I was surprised how many bands were doing that. They never told us anything like that. They never said, you're going to have to do this. We don't have any hits. They got weird on the 3rd record, but by that time, every single person, including the president of the label that was there when we got signed, had all been fired.
Oh.
It's all new people who weren't there when we first got signed. So nobody gave a shit what we were doing. And they still did the Stag record, but they were like, they weren't. I could see the writing on the wall. I mean, I just knew it's going to be gone. But I couldn't believe that we even did 3 albums. I thought we would do the one album, and then I would go back to what I'd always done up to that point. But they would ask us, do you want to go to this, Grammy party? Do you want to do this? And I would just, no,
really?
I don't want to do it.
You didn't want to go to a Grammy party? Good free food.
I never had the interest. Excuse me?
I don't know if you drink, but open bar, some good free food at some of those parties, might as well enjoy it.
I don't feel comfortable with those things. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at that kind of networking. I don't care about that. If that's what I have to do to make it in the traditional way, then it's not for me.
Well, it sounds like you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just don't have any interest in play. They would ask you, there's this big radio thing where you come and glad hand all these radio people. And I'm just like, well, if I have to go kiss somebody's ass in order to try to make them play my record, I'll just be another stooge. I just don't want to do it.
It sounds like
I watched lots of bands do that.
Yeah.
And none of those bands are here now. And I'm still making music, still making a living playing music. And I just think you guys, if you don't want to do it just on the music alone, I'm not interested in playing this game. I'm just not. I don't have any faith in it anyway. None.
Was
You know?
there, I hope this isn't a weird question, but I am, obviously you're very tied to Nirvana. It's my understanding you helped introduce Dave Grohl of the band. Obviously,
Yeah,
Kurt
yeah.
Cobain, it's my understanding Kurt Cobain kind of helped you get that Atlantic deal.
No, he did not. But
Okay.
their
I've
success
read,
did.
I've read that's not the case. I think I read that on, honestly, I think
I,
I read it on your Wikipedia. So get that
I would
corrected.
say that 70+% of the Wikipedia page is sort of true. Yeah.
Okay. That's a decent odds. But anyway, my point is obviously, from the same state, whatever, the paths cross, and a lot of bands were getting signed out of that area, the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Did Atlantic think they were signing their Nirvana, their Pearl Jam,
I,
whatever? Did they think that's what they were getting, and then they obviously got something completely different?
I think they signed us because they thought it would attract other cooler bands.
Makes sense, actually.
That's what they did. So I don't, they did, I mean, they did exactly what they said they were going to do. I
It
mean, we didn't
sounds
get
like
millions of dollars or anything like that, but we got really decent budgets to make albums, and we were very careful with our budgets and knew that this is probably all the money we were ever going to get from these records, and I wasn't wrong about that. So, but we didn't get tens of thousands of dollars in each of our pockets. We got a little bit of money, but made our records, and then two of those albums, the Houdini and the Stoner Witch, are probably two of our more popular albums. So
it sounds like you were in, I mean, you were actually sounds like you were in a really amazing position because I've tried, I've interviewed plenty of those. I've heard plenty of horror stories about, bands getting pressures from record labels to change their sound or getting dropped or, all, the stories. And sounds like you had a really great experience. It got the most out of you could. And it like to the point I was making about what an interesting time it was that major labels were taking a chance on some pretty, not commercial sounding bands. The 90s was a really interesting time where bands were getting signed left and right. Some of them did not have
yeah.
as good an experience as you.
Well, usually what happens is and because you got to remember, let's start a little earlier. Nirvana and those bands they just took those bands and plugged them into the same apparatus that they'd sold Motley Crue albums prior to that.
Sure.
They didn't do anything different. It wasn't like the industry changed at all. It was the music changed, but not how they sold it. Not at all. It was they went to the same radio stations, MTV, the same record people at the labels. So they already knew how to sell stuff like that. It wasn't like that music was so obscure and weird that it would be unpalatable to normal people. Not at all. It's fairly pop music, kind of, but what was interesting about that was their attitudes. Like the guys in Nirvana and the guys in Soundgarden, they were much more punk rock and weird than their fans would ever have known. Like they had eclectic tastes and they liked weird bands and they liked our band, and they could see how and the vast majority of their fans would never hear a record of ours and see any connection at all, because their understanding of their rock heroes is minimal. They don't really have an intimate understanding of what these people think at all. If they did, they would have more faith in what they considered to be good and inspirational, which they don't. So that's the world's not a right place. It's just how it works. And I already understood that. I wasn't disappointed because I didn't set myself up to be disappointed. I just never thought it would work. I just never thought it would work on that level. I just never believed it.
Perhaps
We
that
did.
was, oh, I was just going to say, perhaps that's the best outlook to have. Because if you do sign whatever, if you're an artist and you sign to a major label, you're an actor and you get a role in a huge blockbuster movie, whatever, and you're like, this is it, then
Right.
you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Most bands, and oh yeah, what I was going to finish was most bands that they think that that is it, and if it doesn't work, they can't restart. They can't start over. And we didn't have to start over. We were actually walked out of that deal after 3 albums in a better position for us. We're more popular than we'd ever been. We'd sold more records than we'd ever sold, even though it wasn't on a gold album status or level. But we were fine. And I already knew how to do that prior to that. And we just went back to doing what we'd always done, except now we're in a better position. And as time has went on, it's better now than it ever was then. So if you view it as a war of attrition, as opposed to, a rocket ship straight to, heaven, it's like, I think you're better off. I'm more interested in having a career, a long lasting career, and where I get to be a musician than I am fame. I mean, I'll take half of that in cash,
Absolutely.
Fame is the worst part of it,
Yeah. And obviously, you saw some of your peers struggle with that.
Yes, absolutely. And I approach this from a very working class position, and try to make it work and be realistic. Our booking agent, he says that I'm the most realistic person he's ever worked with, as far as like what I expect or what I think should happen or will happen. And it's worked. It's worked so far. I mean, no complaints. If I can make my living as a musician, that's all I ever wanted.
Yeah. And also one thing that I think is interesting is what, I'm talking about the 90s and kind of the major label signing sprees that happen is another thing, because your fan base has been so loyal. You've talked about how your Atlantic records are among the records your fans like best. There was this weird thing going on back then that when bands who had previously been on indies or smaller labels like Smashing Pumpkins or whatever, or Girls Against Boys or whatever, when they would sign to a major label, people would be like, you sold out. Like, no one cares about that now. It was hilarious to me that like when a band like whatever, Green Day on Lookout Records would move to Warner or whatever, that people would be like upset about this. Like, did you experience any of that then? Obviously, if you did, you emerged unscathed. But like, do you remember that? Like, people would care about such things back then. It's almost like quaint to me now.
Well, I mean, it wasn't like we were universally accepted by the hipsters, so
No,
not really.
okay.
I mean, we were always marginalized by the hipster people, or not all of them, but we certainly weren't universally accepted by all. There was no, like, well, even with the grunge bands, it's like, oh, we're lumped into that stuff, but we're a lot weirder than any of those bands. It's like,
Yeah,
we really don't have any brother bands. Not that I'm not part of any scene. I never felt comfortable. And like, I moved to California in 86, 87.
oh, I didn't realize it was so. I didn't even know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, long before any of that stuff happened. So we moved to San Francisco then, and then we started putting out records on Boner Records in 88. And by the end of 88, roughly, I was doing okay. And then we got signed and we put out a few more albums, and we didn't get signed until to Atlantic till 91 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I had already, and we were long gone from Seattle or that area. I never even lived in Seattle. I lived on the coast.
So did you resent or being kind of lumped into this grunge thing when, as you have made clear, you were kind of an island of a band? You were not a Seattle scene band, and you didn't even sound like those bands. I mean, at all. Like, obviously there were, but you were your own thing. I mean, obviously there were some advantages about being kind of lumped in to that scene, I imagine, but it also was kind of false advertising, really.
Well, kind
not,
of, but
not false advertising by you, but by whoever was calling you that.
Yeah. I was always very excited that people like the Soundgarden guys or the Nirvana guys got big success. I was friends with those people. Uh, they came from nothing. Those are rags to riches stories. Those are true America stories. Those are like that's a Hollywood ending, and then the Hollywood ending with the death as well. A lot of that, um, I never felt anything other than I was proud to be associated with those bands because I knew if their fans listened to us, they were in for a big surprise. Not all of them, but the vast majority of them would pay no attention to us at all, no matter what those bands said about us. So it wasn't like I carved out 10% of those audiences. If I did, I'd have, I think Nirvana sold 50 million copies of Nevermind. I certainly didn't sell 10% of that, you know. you know? Um, uh, so I only ever felt happy for those guys. But especially in the Nirvana case, and then later with the Soundgarden thing, that ended so badly that it's difficult for me to look back on it like, oh yeah, the good old days.
Yeah.
I would honestly much rather have Cobain alive and not famous, because I was friends would still be I was friends with him before he could buy cars with a credit card, you know. And that made no difference to me. I mean, if you can be friends with people when you have nothing and they have nothing, that's real true friendship. So it wouldn't have mattered to me if he never got famous. I was still friends with those guys and would have remained friends with them. So it's a tragic story and with a terrible ending. And I don't know that that's anything I'll ever get over.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it's like people want this thing that where it's like, well, you just remember, like I remember I did an interview after Cobain died, and might have been for MTV even, some kind of, and they were, we don't want to talk about that other part of it. We just want to talk about the good parts. And I'm just like, well, it's all mixed together. I'm sorry, I don't have the ability to just write that off, nor will I do that. As great as it was, it ended so badly that I can't fully enjoy that. So
Well, I think a lot of interviewers, hopefully I'm not one of them, but maybe a lot of interviewers actually kind of forget, like, these are real people who were
yeah,
people's friends, were people's relatives. They
yeah.
weren't
Well,
just these icons.
there, once you get that level of fame, it all does become not real. They become the property of other people, and I don't. That's the deal. That's just how this works, and I think you have to work really hard to not let that go to your head. I could be a really bitter person, yeah. And I've had interviewers ask me millions of times, why aren't I upset that those bands, why aren't I more upset, or shouldn't I be upset? And I was like, they're dead. He's dead. What are you talking about? You think I'm jealous of somebody that had that tragic of an ending? Really? I mean, that's pretty fucked up. I'm still alive. I'm still doing what I'm doing, and I'm not sure what you want me to be. You want me to be bitter? I'm not bitter about anything. I'm not happy that any of that kind of stuff happened, but I am very satisfied and very happy that music that I made and my attitude towards music helped influence and change music on a global level. And that's
Absolutely.
something they can't take away from me. So
Absolutely.
as far as that goes, great, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that either. It's like I need to continue doing what I'm doing. I need to keep my feet moving. I need to hustle, and I'm very excited and happy about all of that.
What are you I mean,
You know?
you mentioned a while ago, obviously, you've got the King Dunn Tour, you have a
Yeah.
new-ish new Melvins album, very
Yep.
recent Melvins album.
Yep.
You already said, because you have to plan these things in advance by a year or more, what you got in the works for the next couple of years? You're already looking ahead to your next releases and next
Oh yeah, yeah.
steps.
We got a big tour planned for next year that's booked, but not going to be announced until October. It's going to be a lot of fun. Um, uh, and I'm going to start recording a new album in November.
November.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a Melvins record, a solo record.
Melvin's record.
Okay, very
New
cool.
one. Yeah. So then who knows when that'll come out? Probably, hopefully we can get it done by the end of November. I would like my last show on this tour with Trevor is October 31st in London. So Halloween night in London. And then I go home and then hopefully start recording by the end of the month.
Amazing. Well,
I have all the stuff. I have all the stuff basically, I'd say 90% finished, you know,
well, what
the
does
song.
that's amazing. What does, I guess the last question I'll ask you is, it's a little bit of a cliche question. It's definitely an open question, but what does keep you going? Like I said, there are some artists who've been around as long as you who maybe would rest on their laurels, but they maybe would tour just doing the classic material. They maybe would be part
Yeah.
of package tours with their peers from back in the day. And you eschew all of that.
No, I would do, we do some, we haven't done any package tours. We did a tour last year with Boris,
Okay.
you know.
But you know what I'm saying? You definitely are not like just living in the past or
Oh, no,
resting
no,
on
not
your
at all.
laurels.
No, 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 not in the least. I mean, I think live, um, I would approach live as, song wise, like a third new material, which is like your set that you're playing. A third would be new material. I mean, new for us in the last something in the last 15 years. You know, a third of it would be earlier material, and a third would be stuff that's more middle ground. Try to chop it up like that. So there's some stuff in there, and there's songs that I really like that for a long time that would be our popular songs for a long time. We avoided those, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm gonna embrace that. That was a long time ago because honestly, if I did a record like Stoner Witch, that's coming up on 30 years ago. So it's like I don't even I remember writing it all and I remember doing the records, but it's like I'm not afraid of that material at all. It's like that's not kryptonite to me. I can play Revolve, no problem. I can play Honey Bucket off Houdini. I don't have any problem playing that song. There are two songs in a set of a 70-minute set. Wow. Does it hurt me? No. And then I realized that there's people in the audience. We probably lose 20% of our audience every year, but we gain new people. People get older when they get to be about 35, they've moved on in their lives and they drift away. And I get it. And so you replace them with younger fans. And so not all those fans saw us do old songs. So I think it's kind of nice if I went and saw the Stones and they played, some of their hits. That sounds good to me.
I saw
I
the
would,
Stones 2 nights ago, and they played
right,
quite a few of their hits.
right, and so that doesn't bother me in the least. I
I
think,
didn't.
yeah, play some new material, but concentrating on it, I think, for a band of our age is probably a bad idea.
Okay, but in terms of, I guess what I was getting at was your excitement to still keep creating new stuff and not
Mm-hmm.
just be just a touring entity or just a heritage act or a legacy act, whatever the term is.
Right, it has to be good. Material has to be good. And if it's not good, then nobody's going to care. So if you're playing good, if you write good songs and you're playing them live, then they'll go over good.
My cat agrees.